The moment Zara felt a vision blur in the hospital elevator, she never imagined the man about to save her life would be the same one who shattered her world 8 months ago. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Linda's Stories. If hope still beats in your heart, like this video. If you believe in second chances, comment, "I'm with Linda." Let's begin. The fluorescent lights of Chicago General Hospital flickered overhead as Zara Williams clutched her swollen belly, her breathing shallow and labored. The contractions had started during her shift at the community center where she worked as a social coordinator, but she dismissed them as false alarms. Now, at 32 weeks pregnant with twins, her body was telling a different story. "Ma'am, we need you to stay awake." The paramedic's voice seemed to come from underwater as they rushed through the emergency room doors. The antiseptic smell of the hospital mixed with the metallic taste of fear in her mouth. Her dark skin glistened with perspiration, and her usually perfectly styled natural hair clung to her forehead in damp coils. The last 8 months had been a whirlwind of independence and determination. After Marcus disappeared from her life without explanation, Zara had thrown herself into building a future for herself and the baby she'd discovered she was carrying just days after he vanished. She'd moved from their shared penthouse apartment back to her modest studio on Chicago's South Side, picked up extra hours at work, and attended every prenatal appointment alone, her hand resting protectively over her growing bump. "Get me an OR stat!" The commanding voice cut through the chaos of the emergency room. "This is preeclampsia with severe features, possibly HELP syndrome. Blood pressure is through the roof." Zara's eyes fluttered as they wheeled her through the maze of hospital corridors. The ceiling tiles blurred past like frames in an old movie reel. She thought about the nursery she'd been setting up in her tiny apartment. 2 cribs squeezed into the corner, hand-me-down clothes folded neatly in mismatched drawers, and the ultrasound photos she'd taped to her bathroom mirror because she had no one to share them with. "What's happening to my babies?" she managed to whisper, her voice hoarse with panic. "We're going to take good care of all of you," came the reply, though the urgency in the medical team's voices told a different story. The operating room doors swung open with a mechanical whoosh. Bright lights blazed overhead like interrogation lamps, and the steady beeping of monitors created an electronic symphony of life hanging in balance. Zara felt the cold bite of the IV needle sliding into her arm, the oxygen mask covering her nose and mouth. "Zara, can you hear me? I need you to stay with us." The surgeon's voice was muffled behind his mask, but something about it made her heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with her medical condition. Through her haze, she caught a glimpse of familiar eyes above the surgical mask. The same deep brown eyes that had once looked at her with love across candlelit dinners in 5-star restaurants. The same eyes that had traced her face in the early morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows of his Lakeshore Drive penthouse. No, it couldn't be. Marcus! The name escaped her lips like a prayer and a curse all at once. Dr. Marcus Sterling's hands stilled for just a moment as recognition flooded his features. The woman on his operating table, the one whose life hung in the balance, was the same woman who had haunted his dreams for the past 8 months. Zara, with her infectious laugh and fierce independence, her passion for helping underprivileged kids, and her way of making him feel human again after years of cold business deals and empty relationships. "Prepare for emergency cesarean," he commanded, his voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside his chest. "These babies are coming now." The irony wasn't lost on him. Marcus Sterling, the billionaire who'd built his fortune in biotech and medical device innovation, was now faced with the most important surgery of his career. The woman he'd walked away from to protect her from the dangerous world of corporate espionage and family vendettas was now depending on him to save not just her life, but the lives of 2 babies he was only now realizing might be his own. 8 months ago, Marcus had received a credible death threat against anyone close to him. His business rival, Vincent Corelli, had made it clear that Marcus's loved ones were fair game in their corporate war. Rather than put Zara in danger, Marcus had made the agonizing decision to disappear from her life completely, telling himself it was the ultimate act of love, even if she would hate him for it. Now, as he made the first incision, Marcus's mind raced through calculations that had nothing to do with medicine. The timing, Zara's condition, the fact that she was here alone, it all pointed to a truth that made his hands tremble with more than surgical precision. "First baby is crowning," announced the assisting physician. "It's a girl." The tiny cry that filled the operating room was the most beautiful sound Marcus had ever heard. Through the controlled chaos of the medical team, he caught sight of a perfect little face scrunched in protest at being brought into the harsh light of the world. His daughter, because somehow, in his heart, he knew these were his children. "Second baby, it's a boy," came the announcement moments later, followed by another strong cry. But Zara wasn't responding. Her blood pressure was dropping and the monitors were screaming warnings that made Marcus's blood run cold. The woman he'd never stopped loving was slipping away just as he'd found her again. And the children he'd never known existed were about to become orphans before they'd even taken their first breaths in their mother's arms. "We're losing her," the anesthesiologist called out. "BP is crashing." Marcus looked down at Zara's peaceful face, her beautiful features slack with unconsciousness, and made a vow that echoed through every corner of his soul. He would save her. He would find a way to explain everything, and somehow he would earn the right to be part of the family he'd only just discovered was his. But first, he had to make sure she lived to hear his apology. The next 12 hours blurred together in a kaleidoscope of medical procedures, worried whispers, and the steady rhythm of life support machines. Marcus had successfully stabilized Zara, but she remained unconscious in the ICU, while their twins, a girl they'd tentatively named Baby A and a boy called Baby B, fought their own battles in the NICU. Marcus hadn't left the hospital. He'd called in favors, rearranged his entire schedule, and positioned himself as the attending physician on Zara's case, despite the obvious conflict of interest. His colleagues assumed his intense focus was typical of his perfectionist nature, but Marcus knew the truth was far more complicated. He stood now in the NICU, watching through the glass as his children, because DNA test or not, he knew they were his, struggled with tiny fists and perfect little faces. The girl had Zara's determined chin, while the boy had inherited Marcus's stubborn cowlick. They were beautiful and terrifying, and completely dependent on machines to help them breathe. Dr. Sterling, Nurse Patricia, a veteran of the NICU with kind eyes and gentle hands, approached with a tablet. The baby's emergency contact information came back. There's no father listed, and the mother's emergency contact is her supervisor at the Southside Community Center. Should we call? Marcus stared at the tablet, processing the implications. No father listed. Zara had gone through this entire pregnancy alone, believing he'd abandoned her when she needed him most. The guilt that had been gnawing at him for 8 months now felt like acid in his veins. "I'll handle the communications," he said carefully. "As the attending physician, I want to personally ensure continuity of care." It was a medical justification for what was really an emotional necessity. Marcus needed to be the one to tell Zara about their children's condition. He needed to be the one to explain where he'd been and why he'd left. And he needed to somehow find the words to ask for forgiveness from a woman who had every right to hate him. His phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. "Corelli meeting moved to Thursday. Board wants update on Q3 projections." The corporate world that had once consumed his every waking moment now felt like a distant planet. Nothing mattered except the 3 people fighting for their lives just floors apart from each other. Marcus made his way back to the ICU, where Zara lay surrounded by monitors and IV lines. Her natural hair spread across the pillow like a dark halo, and her face, even in unconsciousness, held the strength that had first attracted him to her. She'd been volunteering at a charity gala he'd sponsored, working with inner-city kids who'd been invited to see how the other half lived. While other women at the event had focused on his wealth and status, Zara had challenged him about his company's lack of community investment. "You throw money at problems from a distance," she'd said, her eyes flashing with passion. "But when's the last time you actually got your hands dirty helping people?" That conversation had led to their first real date, not at an expensive restaurant, but volunteering together at a homeless shelter on Thanksgiving Day. Marcus had fallen in love not just with Zara's beauty, but with her ability to see the man he could be, not just the billionaire he was. Now, watching her fight for her life, Marcus realized he'd spent 8 months becoming exactly the man she'd challenged him not to be. Distant, disconnected, throwing money at problems instead of facing them head on. Her vital signs are improving. Dr. Susan Chen, the ICU attending, joined Marcus at Zara's bedside. The magnesium sulfate is controlling the seizure risk and her blood pressure is stabilizing. She should regain consciousness within the next few hours. And the long-term prognosis? Full recovery expected, though she'll need to be monitored for postpartum complications. The babies are another story. At 32 weeks, they're facing the typical challenges of premature birth, but their initial assessments are promising. Marcus nodded, his clinical mind processing the medical information, while his heart focused on the miracle that Zara was going to survive. But surviving was just the first hurdle. The real challenge would come when she opened her eyes and saw him standing there. As if summoned by his thoughts, Zara's eyelids fluttered. Her breathing changed, becoming more deliberate, and a soft moan escaped her lips. "Zara?" Marcus moved closer to her bedside, his voice barely above a whisper. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening as they found his face. Marcus watched as confusion gave way to recognition, then to a pain that cut him deeper than any scalpel ever could. "My babies," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube. "Are my babies okay?" "They're alive," Marcus said, choosing his words carefully. "They're in the NICU, and they're fighters, just like their mother." Zara tried to sit up, but the IV lines and her weakened state kept her prone. "I need to see them. I need..." Her voice broke as the full reality of her situation hit her. You're here. You're my doctor." The accusation in her voice was unmistakable. 8 months of anger, hurt, and betrayal crystallized in that single word. You. Marcus felt the weight of every decision he'd made, every day he'd stayed away, every night he'd picked up his phone to call her, only to remember the danger that calling would bring. But looking at her now, seeing the pain in her eyes, he realized his protection had caused more harm than any enemy ever could. "Zara, I can explain." "Explain?" Her voice grew stronger with each word, fueled by a fury that 8 months of pregnancy and single motherhood had only intensified. "You disappeared. One day, we were talking about moving in together, and the next day, your phone was disconnected, your apartment was empty, and you were gone, like you never existed. I had to protect you." "Protect me?" Zara's laugh was bitter and sharp. "I was pregnant, Marcus. Pregnant with your children, and you protected me right into poverty and isolation." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. She'd been pregnant when he left. The timeline clicked into place with devastating clarity. Their last night together. The morning he'd received the threats. The impossible choice he'd thought he was making for her safety. "You knew?" he asked, though even as the words left his mouth, he realized how wrong he was. "I found out 3 days after you vanished into thin air," Zara said, tears streaming down her cheeks now. 3 days after I'd already called every hospital in Chicago thinking you might be dead, because that was the only explanation I could accept for you leaving me like that." The machines around them beeped steadily, monitoring a heart that was breaking and healing simultaneously. Marcus reached for her hand, but Zara pulled away. "Don't," she whispered. "You don't get to comfort me, not after what you put me through." But even as she rejected his touch, Marcus could see something else in her eyes, a flicker of the love that had once burned between them, complicated now by anger and betrayal, but still there beneath the surface. "I need to see my babies," Zari said, changing the subject with the fierce determination that had helped her survive the past 8 months. "And then you're going to explain everything." "And Marcus?" She looked directly into his eyes with the strength of a woman who had learned to fight for herself and her children. "It better be the truth this time, because I'm done with your disappearing acts." As Marcus prepared to wheel her to the NICU to meet their children for the first time, he realized that saving her life had been the easy part. Now came the real challenge, saving the love they'd lost and building the family they'd never planned. But first, Zara needed to hold their babies, and Marcus needed to find the words that could bridge 8 months of silence and a lifetime of regret. The NICU was hushed with the quiet intensity of life hanging in balance. Soft beeping from dozens of monitors created a technological lullaby, while the gentle whoosh of ventilators provided rhythm to the symphony of survival. Marcus wheeled Zara's wheelchair between rows of incubators, each one containing someone's miracle, someone's someone's hope, someone's reason to pray. When they reached the corner where their twins lay in separate incubators, Zara's breath caught in her throat. The babies were tiny, their skin translucent and delicate, with wires and tubes that seemed too big for their miniature bodies. But they were unmistakably alive, unmistakably perfect, and unmistakably hers. "Oh my God," she whispered, pressing her palms against the warm glass. "They're so small." 3 pounds, 2 ounces for your daughter, Nurse Patricia said gently, "and 3 pounds, 4 ounces for your son. For 32 weekers, those are actually very good weights." Marcus watched Zara's face transform as she took in every detail of their children. Her earlier anger hadn't disappeared, but it was temporarily overshadowed by the overwhelming love radiating from her as she studied the tiny faces that held features from both their parents. "Can I touch them?" "Of course," Patricia smiled, opening the portholes in the incubators. Skin-to-skin contact is encouraged. It helps with their development and bonding. Zara's hands trembled as she reached through the opening, gently stroking her daughter's impossibly soft cheek. The baby stirred at her mother's touch, tiny fingers grasping reflexively. "She knows me," Zara breathed, wonder replacing the pain in her voice. "They've been listening to your voice for 8 months," Marcus said softly. "Of course they know you." For a moment, the tension between them softened as they shared the miracle of watching their children respond to their presence. Marcus reached into the other incubator, his large surgeon's hands incredibly gentle as he touched his son's tiny fist. The boy's grip was surprisingly strong as he wrapped his fingers around his father's thumb. "They're going to be okay, aren't they?" Zara asked, and Marcus heard the vulnerability beneath her strength. "They're fighters," he assured her, and for the first time since she'd awakened, Marcus saw Zara really look at him, not with anger or accusation, but with the trust that had once defined their relationship. Just like their mother, the moment stretched between them, fragile and precious, until the reality of their situation came rushing back. Zara's expression hardened again as she remembered the 8 months of struggling alone, the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, wondering if she'd be strong enough to raise 2 children by herself. "We need to talk," she said firmly. "But not here, not in front of them." Marcus nodded, understanding that their children deserved to come into a world where their parents' relationship wasn't defined by betrayal and abandonment. "There's a private consultation room down the hall." 20 minutes later, they sat across from each other at a small table in a room designed for delivering difficult news to families. The irony wasn't lost on either of them that this was where Marcus would typically tell parents about their children's medical challenges, not where he would try to repair the damage he'd caused to his own family. "Start talking," Zara said, her arms crossed defensively. "And don't you dare lie to me again." Marcus had rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times in his head over the past 8 months, but now, faced with the woman he loved and the pain he'd caused, words felt inadequate. 8 months ago, I received credible death threats, he began. "Not just against me, but against anyone I cared about. Vincent Corelli, he's a competitor in the biotech space, made it clear that he would target you to get to me." Zara's eyes narrowed. "So you decided to leave me instead of, I don't know, telling me about it? Hiring security, fighting back? You don't understand how dangerous." "No, Marcus, you don't understand," Zara interrupted, her voice rising. "You made a decision about my life without including me in it. You took away my choice." The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. In his arrogance, in his desire to protect her, he'd done exactly what she'd always feared wealthy, powerful men would do. He'd decided what was best for her without considering her agency, her strength, her right to choose her own risks. "You're right," he admitted. "I was wrong. I thought I was protecting you, but really I was being a coward." A coward? Zara's eyebrows rose in surprise. She'd expected him to defend his actions, not admit to cowardice. "I was terrified of something happening to you because of me," Marcus continued, his voice breaking with 8 months of suppressed emotion. "I've lost people before, Zara. My parents in that car accident, my brother in Afghanistan. Everyone I've ever loved has been taken away from me, and the thought of losing you because of my enemies." He ran his hands through his hair, the composed billionaire facade cracking completely. "I couldn't handle it, so I ran." For the first time since waking up, Zara saw past her own pain to the man sitting across from her. She remembered the nights Marcus had woken up from nightmares about his family, the way he'd held her like she might disappear if he let go. His abandonment hadn't just been about protecting her. It had been about protecting himself from another devastating loss. "So instead of risking losing me to someone else," she said quietly, "you You guaranteed losing me by your own actions. Yes, Marcus whispered, and I lost 8 months of your pregnancy. I lost the chance to be there when you found out about the babies, to go to doctor appointments, to feel them kick. I lost the chance to take care of you when you needed me most. Tears were streaming down both their faces now. The anger was still there, but it was mixed with grief for all the moments they'd lost and the trust that had been shattered. I worked double shifts to afford prenatal care, Zara said, her voice thick with emotion. I went to every appointment alone. I painted the nursery by myself at 8 months pregnant because I was too proud to ask for help. Do you have any idea what that felt like? I'm sorry, Marcus said, the words feeling pathetically inadequate. I'm so sorry, Zara. I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to try to make it right. I want to be here for you and for our children if you'll let me. Our children, Zara repeated, testing the words. For 8 months, she'd thought of them as hers alone. The idea of sharing them, of letting Marcus into their lives after everything that had happened, felt terrifying and hopeful at the same time. What about the threats? She asked. Are we still in danger? Marcus's jaw tightened. Corelli's been dealt with. His company went bankrupt 6 months ago, and he's currently under federal investigation for corporate espionage. The threat is gone. 6 months ago, Zara processed this information. So for 6 months, you could have come back, but you didn't. This was the hardest part to explain, because it revealed the depth of his cowardice. By then, I thought it was too late. I thought you'd moved on, found someone else. I hired a private investigator to make sure you were safe. And when he reported that you seemed to be thriving, I convinced myself that you were better off without me. You had me followed. Zara's voice was sharp with fresh anger. Just to ensure your safety, Marcus said quickly. But he never reported that you were pregnant. You must have been careful about hiding it. I wore loose clothes to work for months, Zara said bitterly. I was terrified of losing my job if they thought I couldn't handle it. Turns out I was protecting your secret even when I didn't know it was your secret to protect. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of revelations and recriminations settling between them. Finally, Zara spoke again. Those babies in there are going to need surgery, aren't they? I can see it in your doctor face, even when you're trying to be encouraging. Marcus nodded reluctantly. Your daughter has a small heart defect that will likely require surgical correction. Your son has some respiratory challenges that may need intervention. Nothing life-threatening if treated properly, but expensive. Zara finished. The kind of expensive that my community center job and Medicaid won't cover. I can handle the medical expenses, Marcus said carefully. For all 3 of you, it's the least I can do. The least you can do is be their father, Zara said firmly, not their benefactor. If you want to be part of their lives, it can't be because you're paying for the privilege. It has to be because you're committed to being here, really here, no matter what threats or fears or business complications come up. Marcus looked into her eyes and saw the challenge there. This wasn't just about forgiveness or second chances. This was about whether he was capable of being the man she needed, the father their children deserved. I want that, he said, more than I've ever wanted anything. But I understand if you need time to trust me again. I don't know if I can trust you again, Zara admitted, but I'm willing to try, for their sake, and maybe eventually for ours. It wasn't a declaration of love or a promise of reconciliation, but it was hope. And for Marcus, who had spent 8 months in a world without hope, it felt like everything. As they prepared to return to the NICU, neither of them could have anticipated the phone call that would test their fragile truce and threaten to tear apart the family they were just beginning to rebuild. 3 weeks later, the NICU had become their second home. Marcus had taken an unprecedented leave of absence from Sterling Biotech, delegating his CEO duties to focus entirely on his family's medical needs. He'd also quietly moved into a hotel suite near the hospital, though he hadn't pushed Zara about their living situation. She was staying in a nearby family housing unit provided by the hospital for parents of NICU patients. Their daughter, whom they'd finally named Maya after much discussion, had successfully undergone heart surgery and was recovering beautifully. Their son David was breathing on his own now and gaining weight steadily. Both babies were beginning to look less fragile and more like the fighters their parents knew them to be. The routine they'd developed was careful and polite. They took turns holding the babies, coordinated their visits so the twins always had a parent present, and slowly, carefully, began to remember why they'd fallen in love in the first place. But the conversations were still surface level, and Zara still flinched slightly whenever Marcus got too close. Dr. Sterling, Nurse Patricia approached with a concerned expression. "There's a gentleman here asking about baby Williams. Says he's from Child Protective Services." The blood drained from both Marcus and Zara's faces. CPS involvement could mean anything from routine investigation to removal of the children from their care. "I'll handle this," Marcus said, his protective instincts kicking in. "No," Zara said firmly. "We handle this together." The man waiting in the consultation room was middle-aged with kind eyes but a serious demeanor. He introduced himself as Thomas Rodriguez, a social worker who specialized in cases involving premature infants. "I want to assure you both that this is likely just a routine inquiry," he began. "But we received an anonymous report expressing concern about the stability of the home environment these children would be entering." "What kind of concerns?" Zara asked, though her stomach was already dropping. "The report suggested that the mother is financially unable to care for premature twins with medical needs, and that the father has been absent from their lives." Rodriguez consulted his notes. There were also allegations about the father's involvement in dangerous business practices that could put the family at risk. Marcos and Zara exchanged glances. Someone who knew their situation intimately had made this report. Someone who knew about Marcus's business dealings and their complicated relationship. "Mr. Rodriguez," Marcus said carefully, "I am the attending physician on this case, and I can assure you that both children are receiving excellent medical care. I'm also their father, and while I wasn't initially present due to circumstances I deeply regret, I am fully committed to supporting my family now, and the financial concerns will not be an issue," Marcus stated firmly. "I have more than adequate resources to ensure these children receive everything they need." Rodriguez turned to Zara. "Miss Williams, what is your perspective on your ability to care for these children?" Zara straightened her shoulders with the dignity that had carried her through 8 months of single motherhood preparation. "I have been preparing for these babies since the day I learned I was pregnant. I have a stable job, a prepared home, and the determination to give them everything they need. As for Dr. Sterling," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "we are working together to determine what's best for our children." "I see," Rodriguez made notes. "Well, I'll need to conduct individual interviews with both parents, visit the proposed home environment, and review the children's medical records. This investigation will take approximately 2 weeks." After Rodriguez left, Marcus and Zara sat in stunned silence. "Vincent Corelli," Marcos said finally. "It has to be. Even though his company is gone, he still has connections, people who owe him favors. Or maybe it's someone closer to home," Zara suggested. "Someone who knows details about our personal relationship." The thought that someone in their inner circle might be working against them was even more disturbing than external enemies. But before they could speculate further, Marcus's phone rang with a call that would change everything. "Marcus Sterling," he answered. "Dr. Sterling, this is Detective Sarah Chen with Chicago PD. We need you to come to the station immediately. There's been a development in the Corelli investigation that directly concerns you and your family's safety." As Marcus hung up the phone, he looked at Zara with an expression that mixed fear and determination. "Whatever this is," Zara said, reading his face, "we face it together. No more running, no more making decisions without me." "Together," Marcus agreed, but privately he wondered if their fragile reconciliation could survive whatever new threat was about to emerge. The police station was a maze of bureaucratic chaos and human drama, but Detective Chen led them quickly to a quiet interview room where the fluorescent lighting cast harsh shadows on her serious face. She was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an economy of movement that suggested she didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Dr. Sterling, Miss Williams," she began, "what I'm about to tell you requires your complete confidentiality until our investigation is complete." Marcus and Zara nodded, their hands instinctively finding each other across the table, the first time they'd touched voluntarily since their reunion. "Vincent Corelli didn't just go bankrupt," Detective Chen continued. "He's been running a sophisticated operation involving medical malpractice insurance fraud, corporate espionage, and extortion. 3 days ago, he was found dead in his federal holding cell, apparent suicide. That's terrible, Zara said. But what does this have to do with us? Before he died, Corelli provided evidence implicating several people in his organization, including someone very close to your situation. Detective Chen slid a photograph across the table. Do you recognize this woman? Zara gasped. The photo showed Dr. Susan Chen, the ICU attending who had been caring for her during her recovery. Not Detective Chen, but Dr. Chen, the woman who had had access to all of Zara's medical information, who knew intimate details about their relationship and their children's condition. Dr. Chen has been feeding information to Corelli for over a year, Detective Chen explained. Patient information, research data from Sterling Biotech, personal details about high-profile patients. When she learned about your situation, she saw an opportunity for one final payday, the CPS report. Marcus realized. She made the anonymous call. That's our working theory. Corelli paid her to destabilize your family situation, possibly to distract you from a hostile takeover attempt of Sterling Biotech that was planned for next month. The room spun around Zara as she processed this information. The doctor who had reassured her about her recovery, who had been caring for her children, had been working for the man who had destroyed her family 8 months ago. Is she still working at the hospital? Zara asked, panic rising in her voice. Has she had access to my babies? She was arrested this morning, Detective Chen assured her. Hospital security has been notified and new physicians have been assigned to your case. Marcus was quiet, his analytical mind working through the implications. What kind of information did she provide about us? Medical records, financial information she had no business accessing, details about your relationship status and living situation. Essentially, she built a profile that Corelli could use to cause maximum damage to your family unit. But why? Zara asked. What did we ever do to either of them? Doctor. Sterling's company holds patents on several medical devices that could have made Corelli billions, Detective Chen explained. When legitimate business approaches failed, he resorted to personal attacks. His theory was that a man distracted by family crisis and legal battles would be vulnerable to corporate manipulation. He was wrong, Marcus said firmly, his arm moving protectively around Zara's shoulders. Family doesn't make me weaker, it makes me stronger. Zara looked at him with surprise. This was the first time since their reunion that Marcus had publicly claimed her and the children as his family, not just his responsibility. There's more, Detective Chen continued. Dr. Chen documented her communications with Corelli, including plans to escalate the situation if the CPS investigation didn't achieve the desired results. Escalate how? Marcus's voice was dangerously quiet. Falsified medical reports, manufactured evidence of parental unfitness, possibly even direct harm to the children disguised as medical complications. Zara felt the world tilt around her. Someone had planned to hurt her babies, to use them as pawns in a corporate game she never knew she was part of. I need to see them, she said, standing abruptly. I need to see Maya and David right now. They're safe, Detective Chen assured her. Hospital security has been doubled, and only authorized personnel have access to the NICU. But Zara was already moving toward the door, her maternal instincts overriding everything else. Marcus followed, his own need to protect his children overwhelming any other consideration. 30 minutes later, they stood in the NICU, watching their babies sleep peacefully in their incubators, unaware of the adult drama that had swirled around them. Maya had grown noticeably in the past week, her cheeks fuller and her movements stronger. David was off the ventilator completely now, breathing independently with the determination that seemed to characterize both twins. They're going to be okay, Marcus said softly, his hand resting on Zara's back. Are we? She asked, not pulling away from his touch this time. I don't know, Marcus admitted, but I know I'm not walking away again. Whatever comes next, CPS investigations, corporate threats, medical challenges, I'm here for all of it. Zara turned to face him, studying his face in the soft lighting of the NICU. You really mean that? I mean it, he said. I love you, Zara. I never stopped loving you, and I love them. He nodded toward their children. I know I have to earn your trust again, but I'm prepared to spend however long it takes proving that I'm the man you fell in love with, the man who deserves to be their father. And if I can't forgive you? Zara asked. If too much damage has been done, then I'll still be here, Marcus said without hesitation. Maybe not as your partner, but as their father, and as someone who will always make sure you have everything you need. It wasn't declaration of forgiveness, but as Zara looked into his eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen 8 months ago. Absolute certainty. Not the certainty of a man who thought he knew what was best for everyone, but the certainty of a man who had learned the difference between protection and abandonment, between love and control. "Okay," she said quietly. Okay, we try. We see what we can rebuild from what's left." As if responding to their parents' tentative reconciliation, both babies stirred in their incubators, tiny hands reaching through the ports toward the sound of familiar voices. For the first time in 8 months, Marcus and Zara reached for their children together, their hands touching as they soothed their son and daughter back to sleep. But even as they stood united as a family, neither could shake the feeling that their troubles were far from over. The CPS investigation was still pending. The hospital was dealing with a scandal that could affect their children's care, and they still had to figure out how to blend a billionaire's world with a community activist's values. The real test of their rebuilt relationship was just beginning. 2 months later, spring was painting Chicago in shades of hope and renewal. The trees along Lakeshore Drive were budding with fresh green leaves, and the harsh winter that had seemed to match the coldness in both Marcus and Zara's hearts was finally giving way to warmer days. Maya and David Sterling Williams, they'd hyphenated the name as a symbol of their blended future, were thriving at home in the penthouse that Marcus had redesigned to accommodate not just his lifestyle, but Zara's values and their children's needs. One entire floor had been converted into a family space with a nursery, play areas, and even a small office where Zara could work on community center projects from home when needed. The CPS investigation had concluded favorably after Detective Chen's evidence proved the allegations were manufactured. Thomas Rodriguez had actually apologized for the stress the investigation had caused, noting in his final report that he'd rarely seen such a dedicated and well-prepared set of parents. Zara was adjusting to life with Marcus again, but on different terms than before. They'd spent hours in couples counseling, individual therapy, and long conversations that stretched late into the night as they rebuilt trust one conversation at a time. They weren't the same couple they'd been 8 months ago. They were stronger, more honest, more committed to including each other in decisions that affected their family. "Are you ready for this?" Marcus asked as they prepared to leave for the community center's annual fundraising gala. This year, Marcus wasn't just writing a check. He was being honored as their major community partner after investing in 3 new programs that provided job training and healthcare access to underserved neighborhoods. "I think so," Zara smiled, adjusting his tie with the easy intimacy they'd slowly rebuilt. "Though I still can't believe you convinced the board to let you teach a business skills class for teenagers. Those kids need to know that success doesn't require abandoning your community," Marcus replied, lifting David from his bouncer while Zara gathered Maya from her playmat. "Something someone very wise once told me. The babies were 4 months old now, healthy and alert, with personalities that delighted their parents daily. Maya was contemplative and observant, studying everything with serious dark eyes that missed nothing. David was more vocal and social, charming everyone he met with a smile that was pure sunshine. "Mrs. Patterson texted," Zara said, referring to the nanny they'd hired, not to replace Zara's involvement, but to support it. "She's confirmed for tonight, and she has both our phone numbers, the pediatrician's contact information, and detailed feeding schedules. And the backup plan if Maya fusses? Skin-to-skin contact and the lullaby playlist," Zara recited. "Marcus, they're going to be fine." Mrs. Patterson raised 5 children of her own. Marcus knew his anxiety wasn't really about the babysitter. Tonight was their first public appearance as a reunited couple, and while their personal relationship was healing, he worried about how the outside world would judge their unconventional love story. The gala was being held at the Palmer House Hotel, but unlike the sterile corporate events Marcus used to attend, this celebration pulsed with authentic community energy. The room was filled with families from the neighborhood, teenagers who participated in the center's programs, volunteers, and yes, wealthy donors. But the focus was clearly on celebrating real impact rather than social status. "Zara!" A group of women rushed to embrace her as soon as they arrived. These were her colleagues from the community center, women who had supported her through her pregnancy and helped her prepare for single motherhood, even when she was too proud to admit how scared she was. "And this must be the famous Marcus," said Janet, the center's director, extending her hand with a warm but evaluating smile. "We've heard a lot about you. All good things, I hope." Marcus replied, though he suspected that wasn't entirely true. We'll see, Janet said, with the frankness that Marcus had learned to expect from Zara's community. These people didn't care about his wealth or status. They cared about how he treated Zara and whether his presence in her life was positive or negative. Throughout the evening, Marcus found himself in conversations unlike any he'd experienced in his corporate world. People asked direct questions about his intentions, his commitment to the community, and his understanding of the challenges facing working families. There was no small talk or networking. Every interaction was real, meaningful, and occasionally uncomfortable. You know, said Carlos, a teenager in the job training program. When Miss Zara was pregnant, she used to come to work even when she was feeling sick. Never complained, always asking how we were doing instead of talking about her own problems. She's always been like that, Marcus agreed. She puts everyone else first. Yeah, well, somebody needs to put her first for a change, Carlos said with the bluntness of youth. She deserves someone who shows up. The comment wasn't meant to be cutting, but it hit Marcus with the force of truth. For all his wealth and success, his greatest failure had been his inability to simply show up when the person he loved needed him most. Later, as they danced to music provided by a local jazz quartet, Marcus reflected on how different this was from the galas they'd attended before. The music was live, but not polished. The decorations were elegant, but not extravagant, and the focus was on community rather than individual recognition. Penny for your thoughts, Zara said as they swayed together. I was thinking about how much I missed, Marcus said honestly. Not just the pregnancy and the birth, but this, your world, your community, the people who really know you. They're willing to give you a chance, Zara said, but you'll have to earn your place here just like anywhere else. Good, Marcus replied. I don't want anything I haven't earned, especially when it comes to your trust. As the evening wound down, they found themselves on the hotel's terrace, looking out over the city lights. Chicago stretched before them, a tapestry of neighborhoods and communities, corporate towers and corner stores, all the contradictions and possibilities that had brought them together in the first place. I have something to tell you, Zara said, her voice carrying a nervousness that made Marcus's stomach tighten. What is it? The community center offered me the assistant director position, she said. It would mean more responsibility, better pay, and the chance to develop new programs. That's wonderful, Marcus said, though he heard the but in her voice. It would also mean longer hours, more travel to conferences and training sessions, more time away from Maya and David. Marcus understood now why she was nervous. The old Marcus might have suggested she didn't need to work, that his wealth could support their family comfortably. But he'd learned that Zara's work wasn't just a job, it was her calling, her contribution to making the world better. What do you want to do? He asked. I want to take it, she admitted, but I also want to be present for the babies, and I don't want to put all the childcare responsibility on you or Mrs. Patterson. Then we figure it out together, Marcus said. Maybe I adjust my schedule to be home more when you're traveling. Maybe we hire additional help. Maybe we get creative about bringing the kids to work sometimes. The point is, we make it work because your dreams matter just as much as mine. Zara looked at him with surprise. You really mean that? I mean it, Marcus said. I fell in love with your passion and your commitment to helping people. I'm not going to ask you to give that up now. And what about your work? Sterling Biotech needs its CEO. Sterling Biotech needs a CEO who understands that the best innovations come from understanding real human needs, Marcus replied. Having a partner who works directly with underserved communities will make me better at my job, not worse. As they prepared to leave the gala, Marcus realized that this evening had been a test, not just of their relationship, but of his commitment to becoming the man Zara and their children needed him to be. He'd passed tonight, but he knew there would be many more tests to come. Marcus, Zara said as they waited for their car. Yes, I love you too. I'm still scared sometimes and I'm still healing from what happened, but I love you. It was the first time she'd said the words since their reunion, and they hit Marcus with the force of absolution and promise combined. I love you too, he replied. All three of you. And I'm going to spend every day proving that love is about showing up, not just feeling something. As they drove home to their children, neither Marcus nor Zara could have imagined that their greatest challenge was still ahead of them. A challenge that would test not just their love for each other, but their commitment to the values they'd fought so hard to align. But for tonight, it was enough to be together, to be healing, and to be building something stronger than what they'd lost. 6 months later, on a crisp October morning that painted Chicago's skyline in shades of gold and amber. Zara Williams stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the simple but elegant white dress that would make her Marcus Sterling's wife in just 2 hours. The past year had been a journey through heartbreak and healing, separation and reunion, doubt and growing certainty that what they'd rebuilt was stronger than what they'd lost. Maya and David, now 10 months old and crawling with determined enthusiasm throughout the penthouse, were being dressed in tiny formal outfits by Mrs. Patterson, who had become far more than a nanny. She was family. Their children were healthy, happy, and developing personalities that brought daily joy and laughter to their home. "You ready for this, Mama?" asked Janet, who was serving as Zara's maid of honor, along with her sister Carmen, who had flown in from Atlanta. "I think so," Zara smiled, touching the simple diamond pendant Marcus had given her, not as an engagement ring, but as a symbol of transparency and new beginnings. They'd chosen matching wedding bands instead of traditional engagement rings, wanting their marriage to symbolize equality and partnership rather than ownership. The wedding itself was taking place in the community center's main hall, decorated with flowers from local vendors and filled with the people who mattered most to both of them. Marcus had wanted to offer a more elaborate venue, but Zara had insisted their marriage should begin in the place where her heart lived, surrounded by the community that had supported her through her darkest days. "Mrs. Zara," Carlos poked his head into the room where she was getting ready. He was 17 now, preparing for college with a scholarship partially funded by the Sterling Foundation that Marcus had established. "There's someone here who wants to see you." Thomas Rodriguez, the CPS social worker who had investigated their family almost a year ago, stood in the doorway with a warm smile and an envelope in his hand. "Mr. Rodriguez," Zara said with surprise, "what brings you here?" "I wanted to deliver this personally," he said, handing her the envelope. "It's the final closure report on your case. But more than that, it's a letter recommending your family as a resource for other families facing similar challenges." Zara opened the letter, reading words that praised their journey from separation to reunification, their commitment to co-parenting despite past hurts, and their successful integration of different socio-economic backgrounds for the benefit of their children. "We'd like to use your story, with your permission of course, to help other families understand that with commitment and proper support, even the most challenging situations can have positive outcomes," Rodriguez explained. "Our story isn't exactly conventional," Zara pointed out. "That's exactly why it's powerful," Rodriguez replied. "You've shown that love isn't about perfection, it's about persistence." Meanwhile, in another room of the community center, Marcus was adjusting his tie with hands that were steadier in the operating room than they were at his own wedding. His best man was David Chen, Detective Sarah Chen's brother, and ironically, a family law attorney who had helped them navigate the legal complexities of establishing paternity and custody arrangements that protected everyone's interests. "Nervous?" David asked. "Terrified," Marcus admitted. "Not about marrying Zara. I've never been more certain of anything, but about living up to what she deserves, what our children deserve." "You know," David said thoughtfully, "most people go into marriage hoping their partner won't change. You're going into this marriage having already done the hard work of changing. That's not something to be nervous about. That's something to be proud of." A knock on the door interrupted them. "Dr. Sterling." It was Nurse Patricia from the NICU, now retired but still a cherished friend to their family. "There are some people here who wanted to congratulate you before the ceremony." In walked a group that made Marcus's eyes fill with tears. The entire NICU staff who had cared for Maya and David, several families whose children had been in the NICU at the same time, and Dr. Williams, the pediatric surgeon who had performed Maya's heart surgery. "We wanted you to know," Dr. Williams said, "that watching you and Zara navigate those early weeks in the hospital, the way you supported each other and advocated for your children, it reminded all of us why we went into medicine in the first place." As the ceremony began, Marcus stood at the front of the room that had been transformed with simple elegance. The community center's main hall was filled with an unusual mix of people: billionaire tech entrepreneurs sitting next to single mothers, teenagers from the job training program, mingling with board members from Sterling Biotech, and 3 generations of families who had found support and hope in this space. When the music began, not traditional wedding music, but a jazz rendition played by local musicians, Marcus felt his breath catch as Zara appeared at the back of the room. She was walking alone, having chosen to give herself away rather than have anyone else perform that symbolic gesture. In her arms, she carried Maya, while Marcus's brother-in-law Carlos walked beside her carrying David. This wasn't just a wedding. It was the public affirmation of a family that had been forged through crisis, separation, and the difficult work of forgiveness. Dearly beloved, began Reverend Johnson, who had officiated at community center events for decades. We are gathered here today to witness something remarkable. Not just the marriage of two people who love each other, but the celebration of a family that has learned the difference between perfect love and persistent love. As they exchanged vows they had written themselves, Marcus and Zara spoke not just about their love for each other, but about their commitment to raising their children with values that honored both their backgrounds, their dedication to serving their community together, and their promise to choose each other every day, especially on the days when choosing would be difficult. I promise to show up, Marcus said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. Not just when it's easy, but when it's hard, when it's inconvenient, when it requires me to be better than I've ever been before. I promise to trust, Zara replied, not blindly, but with the wisdom that comes from watching someone do the work of becoming worthy of trust, and the grace to believe that people can change when they truly want to. When Reverend Johnson pronounced them husband and wife, the room erupted in celebration that felt more like a community festival than a formal wedding reception. Children played between the tables, while adults shared stories, laughter, and the kind of authentic joy that comes from witnessing real love triumph over real obstacles. Later, as the evening wound down and Maya and David slept peacefully in their strollers, Marcus and Zara stepped outside for a moment of quiet together. Any regrets? Marcus asked, pulling his wife close. Just one, Zara said, and Marcus felt his heart skip until she continued. I regret that it took us so long to get here. Maybe we needed the journey, Marcus suggested. Maybe we wouldn't have been ready for this kind of marriage without everything we went through. Looking back on the past year, the crisis that had brought them together in the hospital, the painful revelations and difficult conversations, the slow rebuilding of trust, and the daily choice to create something better than what they'd lost, Zara realized Marcus might be right. So what happens now? She asked. Now we go home to our children, Marcus said. Tomorrow we wake up married. Next week you start planning the new community health initiative. Next month I testify at the congressional hearing about healthcare accessibility. Next year, who knows, maybe we'll be dealing with toddler tantrums and thinking about expanding the family. More children, Zara laughed. Let's see if we can handle the two we have first. As they gathered their sleeping babies and prepared to head home to their new life as a married family, Marcus and Zara both understood that this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. They had learned that love wasn't about never facing problems, but about facing problems together. They had discovered that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting the past, but about choosing not to let the past define the future. Most importantly, they had built something that neither of them could have created alone, a family rooted in authenticity, a partnership based on equality, and a love strong enough to bridge any gap that life might place between them. The little girl who had fought for her life in the NICU was now sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms, unaware that she and her brother had parents who would move heaven and earth to protect them. The little boy, who had breathed his first independent breaths while his father watched in wonder, was now dreaming baby dreams while being carried by a man who understood that being a father was not about providing financially, but about being present emotionally. And the woman who had once thought love meant accepting abandonment now knew that real love meant never having to face life's challenges alone. The man who had once equated protection with distance now understood that true protection meant standing together, whatever might come. As their car pulled away from the community center, carrying them home to their new life together, Marcus and Zara Sterling Williams knew they had everything they needed: each other, their children, their community, and the hard-earned wisdom that the best love stories aren't about perfection. They're about persistence, growth, and the daily choice to keep showing up for each other. Their story had begun with abandonment and heartbreak, but it was ending with presence and hope. And that made all the difference. FM